The red light on the microphone blinked like a heartbeat inside the tense House chamber, and everyone knew something unforgettable was about to happen. You could feel it in the air. That quiet before history shifts. Reporters leaned forward. Members of Congress froze mid-note, and cameras zoomed in on the face of Representative Jasmine Crockett. For the past few minutes, she had listened without flinching as Speaker Mike Johnson questioned her background and mocked her constitutional understanding. But when that light flashed, everything changed. Crockett adjusted the mic, took a slow breath, and in a calm but unshakable voice, began to turn the entire room upside down. "Mr. Speaker," she said, her tone steady, like a trained lawyer ready for cross-examination, "since you question my grasp of the Constitution, let's put the record straight." Every head turned. You could almost hear hearts pounding under the marble dome as she laid out her record: civil rights cases, wrongful conviction appeals, fights that freed innocent men after 50 years behind bars. "I've defended the Constitution in real courtrooms for real Americans," she said. "How many cases have you personally won in federal court, Mr. Speaker?" The room went silent. Even the aides stopped writing. For a moment, the most powerful man in the chamber looked like a student caught without his homework. Crockett kept going, her words simple but surgical. She reminded him how he had supported lawsuits the Supreme Court threw out unanimously, how he had claimed presidents held unlimited power when the court itself had said otherwise, and how he had twisted constitutional principles whenever politics demanded it. Every sentence hit like a hammer. Some lawmakers tried to look away. Others couldn't blink. The countdown clock above her head showed 40 seconds left, yet nobody dared interrupt. Johnson's hand hovered near the gavel, but he knew stopping her now would only make it worse. The tension grew thicker with each breath. "The Constitution isn't a talking point," she continued. "It's a promise. A promise that power must answer to justice." Her words echoed off the chamber walls. Reporters glanced at one another, realizing they were witnessing a moment that would flood every news feed within the hour. The yellow warning light came on. 10 seconds. But Crockett's focus only sharpened. "Mr. Speaker," she said, her voice calm yet filled with fire, "there's a difference between quoting the Constitution and defending it for people whose rights were denied." The silence that followed was so deep, you could almost hear the hum of the cameras. In that instant, titles, rank, and seniority vanished. Only truth stood there, spoken by someone who had lived it. She looked directly at Johnson and said, "You've used the Constitution as a prop. I've used it as a shield." The red light flashed again. "So yes," she concluded, "let's compare records. Let's measure who has actually stood in court defending Americans' rights." The light turned solid red. Her time was over. Yet the power in the room had completely shifted. The Democrats rose to their feet, clapping in open defiance of decorum. Even a few Republicans stayed seated, but nodded quietly. Johnson sat frozen, his face pale, his authority drained. Aides rushed toward him with papers, whispering frantic notes, but the damage was already done. Crockett leaned back in her chair, expression calm, knowing she had just changed everything. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation hit social media. The hashtag, Constitutional Clapback, exploded across timelines. 30 million views by evening. Memes, headlines, live panels. Everyone was talking about the moment when expertise met power, and power lost. CNN broke its broadcast. Fox News flashed a banner. House floor showdown shakes Speaker's authority. Across the nation, professors, judges, and everyday citizens watched the replay, jaws dropping as Crockett dismantled a man who had built his brand on constitutional talk. By nightfall, commentators were calling it a masterclass, a lesson in calm strength and real knowledge. But inside the Capitol, things felt different. Hallways buzzed. Aides whispered. And even Johnson's own allies began asking the question he feared most. Had he just exposed his own weakness? And as Crockett walked out of the chamber, surrounded by flashing cameras, one reporter shouted, "Do you think this changes things?" She paused for just a second, met the camera's lens, and said, "It already has." The screen fades, but the energy stays in the room, like static after lightning, because everyone watching knows. This was not the end of the story. This was only the spark before the storm that would shake Washington to its core. The screen fades, but the energy stays in the room, like static after lightning, because everyone watching knows this is only the beginning. The spark before the storm that would shake Washington to its core. Outside the chamber, corridors buzzed like a beehive. Reporters sprinted toward the exits, cameras rolling, trying to catch every reaction. Staffers whispered into phones. Networks switched to breaking coverage. And within minutes, the moment had turned into a national earthquake. Overnight, that single clip of Jasmine Crockett calmly dismantling Speaker Johnson replayed on every television in America. Retirees watching from living rooms, truck drivers catching the late-night news, and teachers grading papers on their couches all stopped what they were doing. They watched her stare down power and win. People who had tuned out of politics felt something wake up inside them. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. Someone finally saying what they'd always felt about truth and accountability. In diners from Ohio to Oklahoma, conversations started with, "Did you see that Congresswoman?" Talk radio hosts replayed her words on loop. The following morning, newspapers across the country carried the same headline in one form or another. "Calm courage rocks the House." For Crockett, the attention was overwhelming. Her staff phones rang non-stop. Requests poured in from CNN, NBC, and even Fox for exclusive interviews. Law professors wrote open letters praising her accuracy. But inside her office, she kept things quiet, sitting with a cup of coffee, replaying the moment in her head. She hadn't planned it to go viral. She'd simply defended the truth. Meanwhile, on the other side of Capitol Hill, Speaker Johnson's office looked like a storm shelter after impact. Aides shuffled papers, avoiding eye contact. His communications director drafted statements, each one weaker than the last. By noon, his official comment appeared online, polished, regretful, but hollow. He said he stood by his principles, but wished the tone had remained respectful. People saw through it immediately. Late-night comedians cracked jokes. One quipped, "When you bring a slogan to a constitutional fight, you end up trending for all the wrong reasons." Even some conservative commentators admitted the clip was painful to watch. For decades, Americans had seen loud arguments in Congress, but this was different. This was substance-defeating spin in real time. By midweek, invitations flooded Crockett's inbox from universities, law forums, and civic groups, wanting her to speak about practical constitutional advocacy. She smiled when she read that phrase. It meant people were finally valuing results over rhetoric. Across America, ordinary citizens began quoting her lines online. Church groups, veterans' halls, and community centers played the clip during meetings. For many, her calm defiance symbolized something bigger, the idea that integrity still mattered. Back in Washington, tension grew thicker each day. Journalists camped outside Johnson's office. Rumors spread that some moderate Republicans were questioning his leadership. In closed-door meetings, tempers flared. "He should have known better than to pick that fight," one senior member muttered. Inside his own caucus, whispers turned to doubts. Doubts turned into questions, and questions turned into headlines. Meanwhile, Crockett kept her focus on work. Cameras followed her every step, but she refused to feed the frenzy. When a reporter asked if she thought Johnson should apologize, she answered simply, He doesn't owe me an apology. He owes the Constitution respect. That clip alone racked up millions more views. Commentators called it the line of the year. The days rolled into weeks, and the ripple kept expanding. Students in law schools studied her statement as part of their constitutional law units. One Harvard professor told his class, "This is how clarity sounds when it meets politics." Retired judges sent handwritten notes of admiration. Even late-night talk shows, known for humor, delivered rare moments of seriousness, telling audiences that respect for real legal knowledge had made a comeback. Behind the scenes, though, the political cost for Johnson deepened. Poll numbers slipped, donor confidence wavered, and internal polling revealed something stunning. A majority of viewers who had watched the confrontation, regardless of party, thought Crockett had been right. She used facts, he used attitude. One focus group respondent said, and she won. For a speaker who built his image on moral certainty, that verdict was devastating. He began limiting press appearances, avoiding spontaneous Q&As. His team quietly cancelled 2 scheduled speeches about constitutional leadership. Analysts noticed and pounced. Cable news panels asked whether he'd lost authority. Through it all, Crockett stayed composed. In one interview, she said, "I didn't defeat anyone. I just defended the truth." Her humility only magnified public respect. That sincerity resonated deeply with older Americans, people who had lived through Watergate, civil rights marches, and years of political spin. They understood authenticity when they saw it. Soon letters and emails poured into her office, veterans thanking her for standing up, teachers writing that her composure inspired their students, and even former prosecutors praising her respect for the law. At town halls back home, crowds stood and applauded before she even spoke. The moment had shifted her from a regional representative into a national voice. Meanwhile, in the quiet offices of the Capitol, aides whispered that Johnson's next internal vote as Speaker might not be secure. Loyalty was eroding one hallway conversation at a time. Committee chairs avoided photo ops with him, sensing the wind changing. What had started as a single heated exchange had become a slow-moving political quake. For Washington insiders, it was both thrilling and terrifying. Proof that a few honest words, spoken with calm conviction, could reorder the balance of power. Late one night, as cleaning crews swept the House floor, an older custodian paused near the Speaker's podium and said softly to a colleague, "That lady spoke for all of us." It wasn't about parties anymore. It was about principle. And that principle, that truth still carries weight, was spreading faster than any press release. In the weeks that followed, Crockett appeared on Sunday talk shows, where anchors tried to frame the story as rivalry. She always redirected them. "It's not about rivalry," she said gently. "It's about responsibility." Viewers nodded at home, sipping morning coffee, feeling that rare connection between politics and purpose. Each time she spoke, the ratings spiked. Analysts called it the Crockett effect. One columnist wrote, "She reminds Americans why they used to believe in Congress." But inside the Speaker's office, the walls seemed to close in. Advisors warned that every new headline comparing him to Crockett hurt their chances of passing bills. Even allies in the Freedom Caucus whispered that his brand of leadership had become radioactive. 3 months later, Johnson tried to shift attention by introducing a major policy speech. Yet when he approached the podium, reporters shouted the question he dreaded most. "Have you spoken to Representative Crockett?" He forced a smile, offered a vague answer, and moved on. But everyone watching could see the unease behind his eyes. The man once known for confidence now hesitated before every word. Backstage, staff members exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew the power dynamic had flipped. Crockett's name carried credibility. His carried controversy. When the broadcast ended, one producer muttered, He's never recovered from that day. And they were right. The clip of that confrontation had become a modern parable about knowledge, composure, and truth. People still shared it months later, captioned with lines like, "Real leadership doesn't shout. It stands firm." But the story wasn't done yet, because every time the video resurfaced, it reignited the same national conversation. Who truly represents constitutional courage in America? That question was about to take center stage again, in a way nobody in Washington saw coming. The stage lights were back on, the cameras ready, and once more the country would hold its breath to see what Jasmine Crockett would do next. The stage lights were back on, the cameras ready, and once again, America held its breath to see what Jasmine Crockett would do next. It had been months since that unforgettable day when she stood on the House floor and calmly turned the tables on the Speaker of the House. But the echoes of her words still traveled across dinner tables, classrooms, and newsrooms. Now she was walking back into another high-profile hearing, this time not as a target, but as a respected voice, invited to testify before a bipartisan committee on constitutional oversight. The atmosphere inside the Capitol was completely different from before. This time, people leaned forward not to watch a fight, but to hear insight. The same reporters who once underestimated her now adjusted their cameras carefully, knowing that every sentence she spoke might become tomorrow's headline. As Crockett took her seat, the room fell silent again. Even her critics respected her composure. When the chairman gave her the floor, she began with a quiet tone that somehow filled the space. "The Constitution isn't about left or right," she said. "It's about right and wrong." Simple words, but they hit hard. Across the country, people watching on television nodded in agreement. For many, she had become a rare symbol of what political courage could still look like: calm, fact-based, unshaken. As the hearing continued, she spoke about restoring trust, about how the law is strongest when it's applied fairly, about how public service should mean accountability, not ambition. Lawmakers listened, some taking notes. At one point, even the speaker, sitting a few rows behind, lowered his gaze, knowing the entire country was remembering their last encounter. Outside the chamber, a crowd had gathered. Students, veterans, civil rights activists, and ordinary Americans stood in the cold, holding signs that read, "Truth still matters," and "Defend the Constitution." They weren't protesting, they were witnessing. Inside, Crockett finished her testimony with grace. "We can't change the past," she said softly, "but we can choose integrity today." The room broke into applause. A quiet, respectful one this time, but it carried the same message. She had earned something no vote could give: genuine respect. When she walked out into the hallway, reporters swarmed again, but instead of chaos, there was admiration. One shouted, "Congresswoman, do you think America still believes in constitutional truth?" She smiled, paused, and said, "If people keep demanding it, yes, I think we do." That clip went viral again, but now the tone was different. It wasn't about confrontation, it was about hope. For weeks, late-night hosts, political analysts, and even rival politicians acknowledged the moment as a turning point in modern politics. The moment when calm honesty beat power. Across states, Americans wrote letters saying they felt proud again. People who hadn't trusted Congress in years said her words reminded them of why the Constitution mattered in the first place. Back home in Texas, town halls overflowed. Families brought their kids just to hear her speak. She would look out at the crowd and see faces from every background: farmers, nurses, teachers, veterans. And she'd always say the same thing: "You don't need a title to defend the truth. You just need courage." Her message spread like wildfire across social media again, reaching millions. Even celebrities began quoting her lines in posts about justice and democracy. But inside Washington, the political landscape was shifting faster than anyone expected. Behind closed doors, members whispered that Speaker Johnson's leadership had become a liability. A quiet movement began. A call for change, led not by ambition, but by embarrassment. Eventually, even those closest to him admitted the obvious. The day he challenged Crockett, he lost more than an argument. He lost credibility. One morning, without warning, Johnson announced he would step down as Speaker. His official statement said it was for family reasons. But the press and the public knew better. Within minutes, the headline appeared everywhere. After constitutional clash, Speaker resigns. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Cameras rushed to Crockett's office again, but she declined interviews. Her only statement was short and calm. We move forward. The work continues. And with that, she returned to committee meetings, town halls, and the steady rhythm of real public service. Over time, her story became part of political history, taught in classrooms, discussed in documentaries, quoted by future leaders. The viral clip lived on, not as a scandal, but as proof that clarity, courage, and integrity could still cut through the noise. And every time it played, whether on a late-night rerun or in a classroom projector, the same question whispered through living rooms across America. When did politics forget to sound like this? That question became her legacy. She reminded a nation that truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand firm. And that's why, to this day, the moment Jasmine Crockett looked the Speaker in the eye and said, "Let's compare constitutional records," still sends chills down the spine of anyone who believes words can move history. Because in that instant, she wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the very idea of justice. She showed that one calm voice, grounded in truth, can outshine titles, ranks, and entire institutions. And that's something people never forget. So if you've watched till this point, you already know. What you just heard wasn't just another political story. It was a real reminder that courage still exists inside those marble halls, that truth can still rise above the noise, and that one person's calm conviction can shake an entire system. Now here's where you come in. Hit that like button if you believe facts should always win over noise. Drop a comment to tell us where you were when you first saw this incredible moment. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real stories that show the power of truth over politics. Because here, we don't chase gossip. We bring you the moments that define history. Stay tuned, stay curious, and remember, integrity never goes out of style.